this is a wonderful opportunity today to talk about school partnerships. And we have Stan in Orlando with us from the Cincinnati area. And Stan is our Great Lakes Regional Director. He's also our National Strategy Director with the National Network of Youth Ministries, which we're all, many of us are here with that organization, and just thankful for them, thankful for the opportunity they'll be sharing about what's happening in schools in Cincinnati. They've got an example for that, and also across the nation. And I'm going to turn it over to them. Totally looking forward to this, because here in Utah, we've got so little campus ministry. So any of you want to come this direction and help us out, I'd be more than happy to have you come. So Stan, go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, and honestly, you guys, we're going to share. There's probably the stories that are out there that where God is actually doing something with the youth leaders and with the schools and that partnership. And I see a lot of wise voices on this call as well. So I'm excited to see in a small group time what's going to happen. But yeah, Orlando Hale, he's our Cincinnati Area Coordinator, and he's really knocking out of the ballpark. One thing that I was noticing when I was in his role was we were doing well around Cincinnati, but when it came to the largest school district in Cincinnati, which is Cincinnati Public School District, we call CPS, we were making hardly any inroads, and we're like, we need to do a better job. How can we do a better job? And Orlando came on staff, and he was able to make some major inroads in that. And I'd love for him to kind of share his story, what some of those inroads were, especially with a school that started in Bond Hill. So Orlando, why don't you kind of share with us that story, and I'll just ask you a couple questions.
Yeah, so I am also the youth director at a church called Tri-Stone Beginning, which is located in Bond Hill, Cincinnati, which is inner city area that has a high school like pretty much across the street from us. And we really didn't have a good relationship with the school there for a while. And one of the things that the senior pastor really just put in my court was like, we need to make an impact or a difference here, and like now, because we've been here for 30 years, and he actually graduated from that high school and everything. He's like, there's no reason why we shouldn't be making an impact in our immediate community. And so we kind of set out to do that. We just set out to figure out how we could develop a relationship, develop a partnership, and really just figure out ways for us to serve them well, and what needs did they particularly have. And so after a while of really putting that into place and talking with people and turnover with principals and administration and things like that, we finally kind of was able to materialize that into just a day of prayer every week with faculty and staff. We didn't pray with students, but we did pray with faculty and staff before the students got into the room. And we were able to see that materialize into something quite amazing over the course of just a school year, whether it was seeing discipline be impacted by students, whether it's seeing test scores go up for the school, being able to see faculty and staff be more supported. We just really were able to see a lot of things happen. And then we were actually able to galvanize support from other leaders in the area to where we were aiming to cover the school in prayer 5 days a week in person. We got to 3, but this next school year is to get to all 5 days. So a lot of things happen in the midst of all of that. And I think maybe we can unpack a little bit further down the road, but lots of great relationships built from that, really huge impact that I'm really proud of for our community for that particular school.
Yeah, it's been exciting to see what happens. I'll love if you can maybe hold back and share some of the end results of that. But I do have a question for you, and that is, so how did you get your foot in the door? What did you do to make that happen?
Yeah, the quote unquote foot in the door is actually a very funny concept to me, just because, you know, it implies some level of intention on the back end.
Mhm.
And we had none. We had no intention. There was actually this kind of weird period where we were trying to figure out, you know, what was the point of a relationship with the school, and vice versa. Where the school was asking us, like, well, what do you have to offer? And we're like, what do you need us to offer? You know, like,
Mhm.
just there was this kind of this space of not quite being certain, you know, what's the purpose? Why are we here? For what? And of course, you know, we love to say be present. And for us as believers, that means something. But, you know, to them as a principal, as a school that has objectives and directives and curriculum and test scores and benchmarks and things, like, you know, we had to recognize they get approached by a lot of people all the
Mhm.
time for a lot of things. Principals are meeting with people all the time that are offering something, right? And so for us to kind of come empty-handed felt weird after a while. But they kind of, after us sticking with it, they kind of just were like, well, our football team needs food before the game. So see if you can do that. Okay, cool. And we made that happen, right? And so the concept of having a foot in the door really kind of started with not having an agenda, truthfully. And that took us having to break down that barrier for the school, because everyone has an agenda. And most of the time, the agenda for schools is, how do I get access to your students? And truthfully, you know, as faith-based people, whether you're pastor, working for FCA, whoever, that's really the goal, is to get to the students. And we kind of came with a different thing, and we just want to support you as the people who work here, because you're the ones really doing the work with the students. And so once we were able to really kind of get that across to them, they were a lot more willing to let us into the door, to be able to say, okay, they don't really have any motives for this, i.e. the students, which is always the motive, right? But they have to protect their students from the hundreds of organizations and people that try to get in front of their students. And so we had to break it down by being that. It's not having a motive. We just want to help where we can, serve where we can, love you where we can, because that's what we believe we're supposed to do.
Yeah, yeah. We met briefly beforehand, and you mentioned, I thought it was something really, really profound, and that is speaking the language. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah. So there's a concept of speaking a language. You know, as we all are usually pretty involved in churches, there are things that we can say that are automatically kind of cut to the heart of a conversation, right? Like, we can pull out a Bible verse really quickly to make a point, and it's kind of hard to argue, right? But that's a language for us. And so for them, understanding that there's a language that they speak. There are lots of, I call it alphabet soup when it comes to working with schools. So there's another school that I'm with, and I'm on their PBIS team. PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Strategies, right? But they just call it PBIS. And so I had a learning curve of being a part of this team, being a part of the school culture, having to hear here's the SCLC team, and here's the this, and here's the that. And it's like, okay, there's a lot of letters here that mean something. I need to be willing to learn what those letters mean so I can speak their language. And there's not this weird translation barrier that makes conversations harder. And so, you know, every school is different. Every school district is different. Everything that they do is different. But when you take the time to get to learn them and their culture and be able to have those conversations and even overhear conversations in ways to help support, it makes a big difference. And so when I mentioned something like positive behavior intervention strategies, understanding what that is, I had to look it up, and then realizing that there's a community component to that. Like, oh, okay, so this is a foot in the door. There's a community component to this thing that they do that's a part of their school culture. And so I'm kind of helping them meet a requirement, right? But if I didn't know the language, I would have never known how to get into that space and to know where I actually fit. And I think we forget that about schools, is that whatever the language is, you learn that, it'll actually tell you where you fit into their culture, by just taking that time to translate.
Yeah. So for a youth, it's really good for us to examine, do our homework, learn the language of the school before you go in and say, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. you need to know the language of the schools. The other thing is, should we partner when we go to the schools? Should we do it alone? What's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, I think partnering is always the better route. And it kind of depends on a few things. So for instance, we always want to try our best to get to the students, and that's great. But we also think I have to understand that because I'm working with, at least in this particular example, as the youth director for my church, student ministry, that I'm not really the best equipped for that, right? I'm a youth pastor, so I do this well with young people, but I'm not equipped to go into a school and do it. But our brothers and sisters at Fellowship of Christian Athletes, they are. The ones with Crew, Young Life, they are actually equipped legally, financially, right? They have the resources, they have the expertise to do it really well. And so there's that reality that says, it's okay to, in many ways, be a bridge builder for these organizations to come and do the work,
Right.
Because we can get territorial, and having to undo that is really the biggest thing, because my ability to get in front of students has been through the protection and cooperation of other organizations that are kind of structured better, right? Because the reality is that, like, they could get in some trouble knowing that this specific church is involved with their students. That's a real thing. We've seen moments where coaches would get in trouble for praying with their kids and all these different things. But then once you kind of bring in some extra layer of protection for the people you're working with, like a Fellowship of Christian Athletes, then it becomes a little bit easier for that coach to pray with their students. And so I've learned that collaboration and that bridge building and working together with others who may be better equipped, and not even just equipped, better protected to do that work, this goes a lot further for us. And so, you can always develop your own relationship, but I've learned that in working with schools, you kind of, once you get past the principal, there's like the district and what the district thinks and the board and all, whatever the climate is. And we've actually seen, school boards get politicized. And so we got to be careful in how we go about that. And part of it is not having that agenda, just being of service to them. But then also, once we are able to develop a solid enough relationship to get in front of students, to make sure that we're bringing the right people to do that, who are well equipped and properly structured to do the work well, and working with them. So it may not be my church necessarily having their name on everything, but it's okay for FCA to have their name on everything, and we're supporting them in that. And that just comes with some humility and not having to be the person that gets all the shine. It's okay if they're getting that right now, even though I know I'm the one that put in the work for that relationship to happen. It's not about me.
We're on the same team.
Same team.
We're on the same team. But one other question is, one last question I have is there something other that you may have did that you probably avoid next time, or is there something other that you did really well? You say, hey, you haven't mentioned before that you want to mention.
I would just say being patient and consistent. We had a very terrible meeting with the first principal that we met with.
Okay.
When I was first giving that example, and one thing that was said by a ministry partner of mine was like, well, every time we drive by the school, we see that the kids aren't doing anything. And so we want to give the kids something to do. We really want to impact that and give them after school programs and stuff like that. And the principal was just super offended. Mind you, ended up calling our pastor and was like, don't ever send some kids in here. Because of course we're usually the younger people in the room. These are people who have been doing their job for 20 plus years. And so, to them, we're just two kids walking in here talking about giving their kids something to do. And she was like, we actually have, she responded to us in that meeting, we actually have more after school programming in this school than any other school in the city. And so for you to apply that is just wrong, right? And again, that's where it was like, you gotta know the language, you gotta know the school, you have to develop the relationship and know what to say, and not come in criticizing and saying, well, you don't have enough, so we're going to get enough. Right. That does not work. And so we had to be very patient. And I apologize for that for that interaction, and and having to take responsibility for that, but understanding that, like, that took even more time than it should have for us to develop that relationship. But it did pay off with that patience and learning first,
Right.
and being present first, because now not only have I had meetings with this principal, other principals have called and seeing how we can help out their schools, but I've also had a meeting with the superintendent of Cincinnati Public Schools, which is huge because she's got 65 different buildings to worry about, but yet she's willing to meet with me because when she was the principal, she had a great youth pastor that was very present and knew how to do the work well. And so now she's like, how do we get a church connected to all 65 buildings in our school district? And so that patience,
that's a huge deal.
The patience pays off. It does. It pays off big time.
Also, I think what also pays off is we should never criticize. We should always champion the schools, not say, oh, here's something we can help you fix, but here's how we can champion you. And I think we need to go into that method. You can't tell a little bit of some of this. You snuck in some of the little bit of what's going. No, it's fine. Tell them, and this is amazing God thing, but tell them what happened after. Now they're praying in the school. Woodward. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Woodward, and tell them what the principal told you, and then tell them what's been going on now since then.
So some of the success that we've seen as a result of this is, we're praying with the faculty and staff. We're seeing the Spirit of God move in a mighty way. And what we ended up happening was she got a report back on just school disciplinary action. It had dropped 61%, which is just amazing. But we've actually taken the time since then to really evaluate that and understand that the reason why that happened was not because the Spirit moved to the point where kids were just acting better, right? That would be great to say,
right?
But it was actually the fact that because the faculty and staff were more supported and prayed for,
right,
and the Spirit of God moved with them as a result of prayer, that they were better equipped to deal with disciplinary action with the students.
That's great.
So that actually meant that 61% of the write-ups weren't even necessary.
Wow.
Because now I'm more patient, I'm talking better. I've been dealing with some things. We had teachers come in who lost their husband. And speak, I just need you to pray with me because I don't know how to make it through the next couple, and or the anniversary date of me losing my child is coming up. And so I need you to pray with me. And so those were the things that we saw really made a big difference. On top of that, we saw they had the best test scores they've had in decades at that school. They had more juniors pass the state exam than any other year previously, which means that now this coming school year, they should have more seniors to be able to graduate. And so we're going to be able to see the beginning works of a higher graduation rate. We're seeing some things really change just by supporting the faculty and staff, praying with the faculty and staff. The students are directly benefiting from that. Not even a residual effect.
Right.
There's a direct benefit for the young people who work there. Parent engagement is up 30% there at the school.
Wow.
And so those are things that we're seeing that are just huge, and just being present and being able to say, we as a church, we support you. In my role at NNYM, I have access to other churches and really want to do this thing and living out, better together. Now we're able to say, hey, here are these 5 or 6 churches that support you as faculty and staff that can provide some level of help and love and sanctuary for you because you're the ones doing the day-to-day work. And then be able to give access to FCA, crew, like being able to build those things really well and support them. So we're really happy about what is going to come as a result of that.
Stan in Orlando, I'm going to jump in. Really good, great conversation. If you've not been a part of our network conversations, we meet every month, but we try to get somebody to kind of stir our minds, stir our thoughts. And then we go into some breakout rooms and spend about 10 or 15 minutes there, because there's so much wisdom on this screen of things that you have done, are doing, or could do. And so we're going to spend about 10 or 12 minutes in breakout rooms and then come back together and kind of lift up some of those things that maybe was shared in your group, I think like Dill, you mentioned do it without expectations. And then Stan and Orlando talked about not having an agenda, but there's a lot of things that have been stirring. So I think Nick is going to send us into some breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and talk about some things we learned.
Feel free to pause the video here and think through these questions yourself or with the group that you're viewing this with. When you're ready, unpause to hear more of the conversation and the takeaways from the youth workers that joined us live.
All right, that ended like way, way too fast. We were just getting into some deep conversations, and then now we're back in the room.
Yep.
So just curious, particularly people that are not a part of NNYM, I'd love to hear some of your conversations of what you talked about in those breakout rooms.
I was just sharing with our group and a couple shared, consistency, I think is key. Showing up day in, day out, especially being in charge of ministry that have volunteers. And we tell, especially in youth ministry, we tell our volunteer leaders how important it is for them to show up and be consistent. I think we need to do the same when it comes to partnering with schools. Someone in our group was sharing how with COVID, they were able to get in one week, not the next week, but being consistent when they are able to show up and do something, even when they're not wanting us or don't have anything that we can do for them, not giving up. And on the other side of it, not just trying to do one or two big things and then expecting something to flourish and be amazing from that. Like being patient, being consistent, showing up, being faithful week in, week out, and then just trusting God to use it and use us with our consistency.
So good, Dale. Others?
Well, I think we had the best breakout session ever, and all the people that was on it. But the same message that Dale just shared about being consistent is so important. Once you get involved in the schools and just showing up on a regular basis, being there, offering to do anything that they need help with, and it's just a great way to do it. And we talked about some ways to get our foot in the door, as Stan had shared earlier. And one of the ways that, several ways that come out of that. But one of them was, we did some prayer walks around the school. We got to know the principals and some of the staff that way. And it was just a great way to do it. And there's a lot of other ways to make it happen.
It's so good, John. I mean, it really is about relationships. Yeah.
It's building that relationship and being consistent with it.
There's some other gold out there.
Yeah, I'll share with the group one other thing that I shared in our breakout is it can feel overwhelming trying to do everything yourself as an individual. Before we broke out in groups, it was talked about how partnering with others is great, other churches, but also partnering with those within your own church, connecting people. Part of what I do, I get complimented, oh, I'm crushing it. And I'm like, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm doing that much. All I'm doing is, hey, they tell me about a need and I connect them with someone that can feel that need. And it does it. I think sometimes we get overwhelmed because we feel like, oh, we have to shoulder that burden. We have to do it. But really we can bless someone else by letting someone else bless our schools and do those things. And don't feel like we're burdening others by asking them, hey, do you think you can help out? So many view that, and it's a blessing for them to be able to help out versus trying to shoulder everything ourselves and getting burned out and feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's good. All right, if any NNYM people want to chime in, I definitely don't want to be the result of you not sharing a deep thought.
Well, if I could share something, this was coming from a superintendent who was like, very clear, and something that I've been sharing with churches in the area is it can get very overwhelming to try to figure out ways to be of service to the school because schools have just unlimited need, it seems like. Right? And so one thing that you can do as a strategy is just figure out what's the one thing that we can help with. Literally, And if you have capacity, what are the 2 or 3 things that we can help with to take off of their plate? So like, you know, we'll just provide meals for the football team. That's 10 meals a season, right? And only half of those are home games. So it's really just the home games. Like, how do we get 5 meals for the entire football season to this church, to this school from our church? That's a very simple thing that has a huge impact. And so don't feel like you have to be the end all answer and the safety net for the school. Just find what 2, 3 things max that you can really do to take off of their plate and to help them breathe a little easier. You'd be surprised how far that goes and how big of an impact that'll have.
Orlando, we did that in Burleson. We each year we had a church volunteer to host those football meals, and then each youth pastor traded off on Thursday nights, and we all got to be in front of the students and minister to them. And so it was definitely a network partnership. And trading off the church has helped out too. As a result of that, even just this last year, we saw 11 football guys come to Christ and get baptized. So it was a tremendous time.
And that
It was network driven.
Yeah, that makes it all worth it. Just one of them doing that, like, but you got that times 11. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah. So in Paso Robles, we ran into a little bit of trouble, and the principal was a little skittish and kicked us off campus for about a year until she did some of her legal homework. And when we came back on, the presence was just as simple as she said, I need more eyes and ears on campus. And so, you know, our goal was to connect with our students and to meet their friends. And so we just made the rounds around campus, and when we would check in, they would give us like a territory or an area that they wanted us to kind of keep an eye on, and some specific bathrooms that they wanted us to walk into and check. And they just kind of figured, you know, if you're there, there's less likelihood of something going down, just your simple presence being eyes and ears there. And that was obviously the super simple thing we could do, as opposed to say walking on campus, finding your students and just hanging with them for 20 minutes. Just kind of making the rounds and being another pair of eyes and ears, I think, is a service that can be offered that, it's cheap, it's free, it doesn't cost us anything. It adds a little bit to them. And then all we got to do is, you see something going down, you just find the right people to notify. So maybe that's a doorway that gets in for some people, is just, hey, I'm eyes and ears. I'm another adult to talk to kids. That's an awesome thing. Just being there without asking anything and offering, your presence.
That's good. I think I'm hearing kind of a theme about, I feel like maybe 5-10 years ago, we went in with an agenda, but I mean, that door's going to get shut so fast, so quick. And building relationships, and then following Jesus. He didn't come to be served, but he came to serve. So how can we serve that community? John, I see that hand.
2 quick thoughts. The first one is, when we start administering a juvenile correction facility, we have the same obstacles. So the process is the same, it just takes a little bit longer. And the security issues make it harder. The second one is, as NNYM staff, I don't think we're called to start school ministries. I think we're called to champion others who are called to do those ministries. If we become too involved in one school, that one school can become all-consuming. Even if we become involved in one school district, that one school district can become all-consuming, and we lose the focus of connecting other leaders who are called to give themselves to that one school or that one district. Like to hear some feedback on that. Am I wrong?
John, I agree with you. I love what Orlando's they're not connecting to the students themselves, they're connecting to the teachers. And that's that one thing. I think what's mentioned is one's relationship, and one, it doesn't have to be complex. It's that one thing that you can do and do well. We should do it. And I remember it's now Rachel's over here. Rachel's senior pastor used to be the youth pastor, and he went to the junior high school and just asked what he could do. And they say, we're low on janitor staff. Can you clean the tables? And from there, they saw him just interacting with students and saying, hey, this is somebody that should be more than just clean tables. We need to keep on moving him into speaking to students. So if you do just one thing really well, it's, I guess, the same parable of the of the coin. We do well with that one thing and produce it, more things can happen. So,
and I would agree with that assessment, John, as well. That like our goal would be to build as many bridges as we possibly can, you know, for that. Because one thing that I've also recognized is that if you don't have anyone to own that school church relationship and partnership, that it's not going to grow. And so I think we're uniquely positioned to be able to steward those relationships well, be bridge builders for those, and advocate for the student pastors, youth directors, whatever that person's role is, advocate on their behalf to allow for that space to happen. I think one thing we talked about in our breakout room was like, you know, having the bandwidth to do it and having the blessing of your senior leadership to do it as well. So that's one thing that Rachel mentioned, is that because that's the role that her current senior pastor used to have, go ahead and do it. And so I find myself, you know, in those rooms with senior pastors who love to talk about partnering with the schools to say, hey, that means you need to let the people who actually work with young people do this work. Because you're not, as a senior pastor, going to be the one walking the halls. It's your youth pastor and your student pastor, your children's pastor in elementary school that's going to be doing it. So I think that's what our role would be, is how we can develop those relationships and really drive and advocate on behalf of those who are doing the work to be present in that work.
Because you're really building trust, like over time, that trust is gold. We partnered with an elementary school, and the principal, we had so much trust, he'd bring me in his office and ask me questions about the Bible that he didn't know, but the door was closed and it was a safe place because he could trust me. So I think trust is big. I'm gonna hand it over to Kevin.
Yeah, just thank you for that. Amazing thoughts. I am totally ears, because I need to apply so much to that here in the Utah area. But with that, I want to hear, what's your takeaway? What's one thing that you can do from today, from what you have heard, or one thought that's like, I need this, I need to do something with it. So I'd love to hear from people. And I'm just going to out and take a risk. Rachel, I would love to hear from you. What do you have to say about a takeaway from today?
Yeah, so I was just writing notes about things that I needed to do after this meeting. And the first one that came to my mind is just, we have a new principal at a local middle school, and I have reached out to her, just told her welcome, but I'm going to send her an email or give her a call and just be like, what's one thing that I can do to make your first year easier? And just see what I get back from her.
That's awesome. I appreciate it, Rachel. Emily, what about for you? I know you have a lot of youth ministry experience. I'd love to hear what's your takeaway.
I think it's always good just to be around other people who are thinking like this, and looking at the idea of how we can continue to have those conversations in our local community here in Richmond. How do you build those strategic partnerships so you aren't doing it alone? And how can you see a whole city saturated? You know, if everybody's responding to that call that they feel to go to Northeastern School District up here or Richmond School District, if we can kind of look at that as a collective approach, that we don't have to all do everything, but what do we do, you know, if we can just take on certain things. And I think there's certain programs that have been successful. So as we find those things that are work in schools, how can we share that so that those programs might be something that you even come around to get into more of the schools to see all those different ones reach. So again, just that power of collectiveness, and that fuels my fire to keep connecting with people to see multiple schools reached here in this area.
I love that passion, Emily. Thank you. What about you, Tom? Can you tell me what's a takeaway? What's something you can do with this?
I think the thing I heard a little bit ago, and I can't remember who said it, but about relating with teachers over a longer period of time, and making sure that we're connecting with them, not just for what we can get out of them in a sense, but what we can do and how we can serve them. So I think encouraging the staff around the country that I serve to keep building those kind of relationships with people in the schools, so they earn the trust. I call it becoming an insider on the campus.
That's really good. Yeah, I love that idea of speaking the language and being able to, that insider. That's a good one. Excellent. Any other thoughts? Although I got to pick on somebody, Dottie. I just appreciate you so much. And you've been doing youth ministry many years. What's a takeaway, or what's something that you want to add to the conversation?
Somebody made a great comment, and it was, Nick, look to what is already happening on the campus and partner with them. Too many times we want to go in and make our own splash, but there is so much value in, we used to call this a community survey, looking at what's going on, looking what can be done better, and look at what needs to be done, rather than going in with, this is what I want to do. So, okay.
Dottie, I heard a missionary say one time that when we do short-term mission trips internationally, we go in and say, it's like somebody knocking at your door going, hey, I brought you pizza. They're like, we didn't order pizza. And so meeting people's needs, we always come in with our agenda. I mean, we've got to stop. Yeah. It's good.
Excellent. Well, any other thoughts, any other takeaways that you all have?
Just wanted to add one more thing. A lot of times I'll talk to youth pastors and they run in and they talk to the superintendent or they talk to the principal. And I think there's value in talking to the principal, but there is so much value in just partnering with the teacher that's running the Christian club. I'm amazed at the doors the janitor opens for me, just because I show up, I'm faithful, I can be trusted, the whole 9 yards. And then I'm amazed at how just partnering with that teacher opens doors for me with the principal and maybe with the superintendent. I just always like to remind people, you cannot get official permission to share the gospel from the superintendent. He will not give it to you. He can't. So, if your goal is to share the gospel, that's mine. Okay. He can't give me that permission. So.
Good word. Good word. Tom, were you about to say something else?
I was, but I don't know what the agenda is here. So I want to wait until the appropriate time. So I don't know if you're opening it up for discussion or just what's happening.
Just what's happening, what your takeaways are. So
okay, I'm not doing a takeaway. I'm doing a new thought.
I love it.
Well, the beauty is we'll hang out afterwards so we can, for those that have time to do so.
Yeah, we'll definitely have an open conversation afterwards. Just kind of the show after the show idea. Just to be able, whatever comments and conversations, because we're networkers, we love to hang out with each other. And then with that, I want to just thank you for coming on here and give you the idea of what your next network conversation is, and what that next conversation could look like. We always have something called free refills, that we have a podcast that also goes into school partnerships this time. So you can take a download on that podcast, listen to it, and we'll do a follow-up so you get the information for that, a follow-up email. Their next network conversations is going to be in a month from now. We're looking kind of how does Jesus impact our networking? Many times we can do networking and not have Jesus in the center. So what does that look like? Having that unity focus that is directly on what Jesus does in our networks. Then other things, we've got another idea, something is 9 months missions trip. Is something that has been doing an amazing job of equipping teenagers to go onto campus, to see it as a mission field. It's another direction we can take. And so that's just an opportunity. Yet again, in the follow-up email, we'll have more information on that. And I also wanted to see you at the polls coming up. Rick Eubanks is somebody who's been doing that forever. Appreciate him. He's part of the initial team that was working on that. See you at the polls is an excellent opportunity, September 28th and that whole week, to be able to get prayer on campus with students and get a connection point for them. It's student-led, student-driven, but we're the ones who can coach that along. So along those lines, we are going to go ahead and close in prayer and just keep the conversation open. If you need to leave, that's okay. Appreciate that, appreciate your time, but we love to have you stay on and just talk more about the topic or whatever comes to mind. So on that, I will go ahead and pray for us and pray for you that you can make that connection on the local school so that more teenagers can be impacted, can be connected to Jesus because we're connected to Jesus. So let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all these leaders who care about you, care about teenagers, and care about the schools. I just pray that we can see unity happen and that your love can be shared, your joy can be shared, and that we can share the gospel throughout our communities, in our schools, in the lives of all these teenagers that need you. Help us to be the lights ourselves, to connect more deeply with you, to abide with you, because we need you so much. And from there, have that love to share. In your name we pray, Lord. Amen.
Thanks for viewing this network conversation, brought to you by the National Network of Youth Ministries. We hope it helps you to set the table for unity and further conversations with other youth leaders. Any shared links are in the comment section on NNYM's YouTube channel. While you're there, feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to join our next conversation or training, you can find upcoming live events on our Eventbrite page. You can also connect to a local network leader at nnym.org. We're here because we are better together.